Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And a lot on the agenda for this podcast, and lately, as always. But we're certainly in a different world in the United States. You could say we're moving into a third world. Isn't that really the case in Queens and other areas in the United States, especially at
Unfortunately,
our airports?
unfortunately, it is. It has become absolutely ridiculous. The streets of Queens, particularly in AOC's district, have become a third world country with illegal immigrants selling stolen items on the street. But now it's not enough that the immigrants themselves are stealing and reselling items all over the street. Gang members from
Hmm.
MS-13, among other gangs, are now selling right in broad daylight false identity documents that migrants can buy, phony social security cards, phony immigration documents, so that they can get driver's licenses, work visas, and literally just steal people's identities.
Well, why wouldn't it be that way? I mean, that's America 2024. It's Uncle Joe's America. Doesn't shock me at all. I think if these migrants do engage, which they have been in violence and assaults, I think New York City should follow the San Francisco model, the BART model.
Oh,
And if you're really in deep shit, then all you really have to do, especially in the minds of liberals, is go to the BART ticket office and get assault cards like Monopoly. So if someone's about to rape you, okay, just hand the individual, not the perpetrator, everyone has rights, the card that says, "Hey, we're all in the same world," or "Don't do that." You or one of them actually
but
says, Dr. Loppin, "You got me." Brutal,
the, the the
brutal.
the purpose of the cards is actually not to hand to the perpetrator, but to hand to another bystander so that they know you're being assaulted. Because, first of all, when you're being assaulted, you've got plenty of time to dig through your purse or your pockets to find one of these cards, find somebody to hand it to, rather than just screaming for help.
That's what I was going to say, Dr. Lopkin. Usually, when I'm getting my ass kicked, which hasn't happened in quite a while, basically, I would probably scream. And maybe it's not a good idea. Let's just say if you're a woman and you're about to be assaulted, to open up your purse because now they may know that you have a wallet
But
or might have
what
something expensive. There you go.
even more than that, though, what does it say about the San Francisco BART system that they are essentially telling people, we expect you to be assaulted, so here's a card for you to use?
Only in the liberal mind. You have to see the commercial. It's actually hysterical, or the promotional video. Two, you can just tell entitled liberals, uh, some, Ivy League little, little Bo Peep diploma recipients talking about the wonders of the car. They've probably never been on the subway, and there you go. It's total liberalism. Same thing like we had in New York City when you had the Three Stooges at Rockefeller Center, or yes, at the fundraiser with Obama, Clinton, and Uncle Joe. And meanwhile, when there's a fallen officer funeral not that many miles away, not a good look for Uncle Joe. And by the way, no media was invited because they knew it was an F up.
No, there was, I mean, it wasn't just a bad look for Joe Biden. You have four presidents, three former, one current, all in New York at the same time. Only one of them was actually invited to the wake because Trump was the only one to reach out to these folks. Not only that, but because it was Joe Biden having this fundraiser, New York police officers that wanted to go to the wake were not allowed to because they were assigned to provide security for this fundraiser. How
Yes.
disrespectful is that? You're not only not paying attention to the family, you're not only ignoring the situation. In fact, at the time of the wake, Biden decided he was going to do a podcast, but you're
Well, no, no,
actually,
no. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He didn't decide. Let's
well,
be
right.
fair.
He was
Yeah, there
doing
you
a
go.
podcast.
There you go. Thank
But
you. Yep.
not yeah, but not only is it disrespectful, but you are keeping people who want to go to this wake, who knew the officer, who worked with the officer. You're forcing them to work security for you instead of attending a fallen officer's memorial.
Okay, but not to get too metaphysical about it, isn't it really indicative of the sea change of the parties? There's some idiots, especially Democrats, that think that the Republicans are the country clubs. That train left the station like in 1985, okay, along with Live Aid and other events. It is the Democratic Party that is the party of elitists, of out of touch liberals that need the propping up of dependents in order to keep their magic trick alive. But that's really the two party system. It's the Democrats that are the elitist that basically prop up the underachievers to keep them in business. These people, if they had any respect, as you said, would you could have it somewhere else. You could make some type of some type of arrangements to minimize to have it at a different day, but they don't really give a what, do they?
No,
And
they
it's so gaudy. They always talk about Trump being gaudy, which he is. But it was like an old Rolling Stones concert. You had Obama, Clinton, the pedophile, and Biden, the senile old man, coming up from the stage. It's like Rolling Stones a la 1980. The only reason they probably had that is because Biden would probably 50-50 chance he would fall down.
Well, it's generally accepted that Biden would not have been able to raise the money he did without Clinton and Obama. But more than that, I mean, you're talking about, the country club image. Which one of these is really a country club image? Donald Trump, who was meeting with the family of a fallen officer, who was talking with the police officers, and who's who was asked to talk afterwards to the media, and he did not make a campaign speech. His comments to the media was about the situation, was about how horrible crime is and that something needs to be done in order to protect and restore respect to police officers. In contrast to that, you have the three presidents with Queen Latifah, Stephen Colbert, Lizzo, a number of other celebrities
Has
ra-
beens.
raising money so that the evil Donald Trump doesn't get back into office.
Yes. Very interesting. Speaking of that, they'll do anything to keep him out. It's essentially very, very, very fascinating that Tucker Carlson, I saw a segment of his podcast. He was talking about the fact that Mar-a-Lago raid really propelled Trump and it ascended him into the situation of becoming the Republican nominee. He wasn't so sure that Trump would be the nominee without that and other court cases. And I love his comment. He even goes deeper than that, basically saying it's essentially this presidential race is basically what country are we living in? In other words, it's do we really have elections? Because to that whole Mar-a-Lago raid made no sense. It's totally out there, and essentially, it's the deep state saying you cannot run. Very chilling. And who's the threat to democracy? Hello.
Well, I mean, that is something that needs to be taken a look at. They keep saying, oh, Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. We have to keep him out of the office because he's a threat to democracy. Really? Who was the president that colluded with social media to shut down comments about his son's criminal activities? Who was the president that colluded with social media to shut down free speech about the COVID vaccine? Who was the president that emboldened Iran financially to help fund terrorist attacks? Who was the president that told Vladimir Putin an incursion into Ukraine was fine? Biden is the one who is a clear threat to democracy. He's done it over and over again. And now you have all of the lawfare attacks on Donald Trump, the Mar-a-Lago raid, the Letitia James case, the case down in Georgia, the Stormy Daniels case, which hush money in New York, which is absolutely amazing because the federal government already looked at this and went, there's no crime here, there's no case. So who's really the threat to democracy?
That's with 100%, and it's obvious. But don't ask the mainstream, or I'll tell you, I'll say corporate media that, because they're propped up because they like the status quo. It's all corporate media with corporate interests. But I am concerned about the New York case, the hush money case. Yes, it's a BS case, but the trial starts the 15th. Because without these trials, Trump's president. Let's just cut the shit. I'm a little concerned about, and I'd love, and I'm sure our listeners would like your insight into that. I mean, it's April 15th. It's going to go on probably for 6 weeks. That brings us into the end of May. Impact, no impact, probability of conviction. Because I'm actually scared, Dr. Lopkin, and this is not just talk for the podcast, because we cannot afford 4 more years of Joe Biden. I can't afford 4 more years of Joe Biden. So I think it's critical that he needs to be removed, obviously through the electoral process. But I am scared that, especially with corporate media feeding the scandalous details about Stormy Daniels and what she said, what he said. Your thoughts?
I think it's going to depend on how political the jury is. If you have an actual jury that decides on the facts, they are going to see that the federal government investigated this and found no case, that there is a federal charge that the federal government looked into, that Alvin Bragg has no jurisdiction to prosecute. There is a local charge that Bragg does have jurisdiction that is beyond the statute of limitations. So there literally is no case to be brought by Alvin Bragg. If you have a politicized jury, they're not going to care about the facts. They're going to go, we hate Trump. We vote to convict.
Orange man bad.
Right. Orange man bad. Exactly. Now, I don't think
Well,
any
let me just interject
conviction.
something. OJ got off in L.A. because you had a genius jury. Could you have a deja vu all over again, but reverse?
It can go either way because remember, the important part of this in terms of the jury decision is Alvin Bragg has to convince 12 jurors that Trump is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Trump's attorneys only have to convince one that there's no case. And that one juror could stop the entire travesty. And I think that's what they will focus on, the Trump attorneys, is finding that one juror that is willing to say, no, there's no case there. This is absolutely ridiculous. I'm not voting guilty. Now, I don't believe if Trump is convicted, I do not believe, as a matter of law, any conviction in this particular case would stand up on appeal. The question is, will the appeal be done fast enough? And will people care if an appeals court finds him not guilty after the jury says yes? So this is fraught with difficulties on both sides.
I would agree. I think it's really sick. It's really troubling because right now you look at the polls. I just saw a recent poll coming out that especially with RFK, who's now qualified or yes qualified in 5 states, it's not looking good for Uncle Joe, and the trajectory is not good either. Even you look at his economy, which he touts, and maybe the only thing that's keeping him above water, believe it or not. The Pawn Stars, one of the shows stars on that show was on, I believe, a Fox Business segment, basically saying that in the pawn shops are really good indicators, bellwethers, canary in the coal mines, on how people feel, what their attitudes are, and how the economy will be doing in the future in the consumer sector. And he says there's a big uptick in people selling, hawking stuff because they're scared and maybe just don't have money. So, what is your
Well,
thoughts?
the fact that they don't have money is the key there, because we do know that consumer debt has reached an all-time high because people are relying on credit cards to buy groceries, to buy gas. There have been a number of reports of people having to take loans and withdrawals on their 401k and retirement plans
No doubt.
just to meet the day-to-day bills. We do know the average American right now is spending $1,100 a month more on basics and on necessities than they were in January 2020. Goldman Sachs actually just came out predicting that by Memorial Day, gas is going to be hitting $4 a gallon again.
Okay, that to me, we need to stop on that because I think that it could be game over. Okay, the summer is very close to the election, obviously, right? Okay, people have that sentiment, and I think it stays with them for a little while. $4, 4.25. You know, let's just suspend the court cases for a second. Money talks, bullshit walks. Court case, and I'm sure MSNBC and CNN will be, fixated on that. But when people are already $1,000 a month is a lot of money, and now you got 420, deja vu all over again, just like at the beginning of Biden's administration. I think people are going to be really pissed, and his edicts, his mandates for all this environmental nonsense. Basically, Mr. Wonderful was saying that trucking industry there'll be major bankruptcies because of his fleet requirements. This guy is just not in control. I agree 100% with Ted Cruz that the guy's out of it. He said this a year ago, and he got about a bunch of 25-year-old, 30-year-old Ivy League graduates who are essentially socialists calling the shots. Why not? Why wouldn't you have things like, instead of Easter, it's now Trans Day? These people are nuts.
Yeah, it is a difficult situation, and the economy is going to swing things. This is what people are going to be faced with day in and day out. And Harold Ford actually had stated this a while back. He goes, there are three really big indicators that are going to play either for or against Biden, depending on what happens. And those three indicators are the cost of gas on Memorial Day, the cost
Yeah.
the cost of food on the 4th of July, and the cost of clothes and back to school supplies
Cool.
in
Yeah.
late August and
He is so
September.
good. Can I
And
ask another question as an aside? Why do they why don't they just not go with him? Jessica Turtle, she's a moron. An absolute moron.
well, I don't know what's going on with Jessica Tarloff, but she is in a world of trouble herself because she has been sued for defamation of character by Tony Bobolinsky because
Yes.
of her comments that were completely untrue, that his legal bills were being paid for by a Trump super PAC. And she did not, she made a clarifying comment, but she did not apologize. She did not rescind the comment. And now she is being sued for defamation of character. So Lord only knows what's going to go on with her.
She's just a whining. She is the quintessential whining liberal,
Well,
entitled, spoiled brat.
she will be leaving Fox News shortly.
Oh,
Not
shucks.
not permanently, as far as I
Oh,
know. Not permanently, as far as I know, but she will be leaving for maternity leave. And we will see what happens to Fox's ratings on the shows that Jessica is on. And, there are loads of people, Fox viewers, that cannot stand her.
I can't
Hope,
stand her.
hopefully Fox will go, you know what? We're losing viewers. People are literally turning off the channel when she is on. Well,
Well, her voice is like watching a friggin' someone going on an old school blackboard. It's
I
brutal.
completely support, and actually, Jessica herself brought this up, but I completely support Fox's effort to give both sides of a story. That's what
Yes.
Jessica Tarloff is there for. But you can't give both sides of a story if your viewers are turning you off.
I like that. Excellent. Well done. No question about it. But you're looking at the media overall. I love this, and I love some Bill O'Reilly comments. He's very down on NBC News and MSNBC in particular. How can you not? But basically, they had a complete meltdown. 100% unprofessional. We talked about it last week, but it's worth quickly reiterating about the former RNC chair just being a little sliver of their overall lineup. Basically, it was probably management kicking and begging to just have some kind of relevancy. But no, no, no. They are, to use a Yiddish word, mashugana.
No, no,
They're nuts. They're crazy.
management caved to the on-air
Yes, they did.
talent, and
Well, talent. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's
well,
use that term very. Let's
on
not throw
on
that
on
around too much.
on-air people.
There you go. Thank you very much. Yes.
Yes,
Very good. Yes.
these are not talented
No,
individuals,
please,
but
please.
it is absolutely amazing that NBC would issue a statement saying that a news organization cannot function if all of its members are not in lockstep. No, this is completely 180 degrees in the wrong direction. You do not want a news organization in lockstep. You want dissenting opinions. You
Not
want
them. No, no. It's a propaganda arm. They're all drinking the same Kool-Aid. I actually believe it. Ripley's Believe It or Not. I actually used to watch NBC. I don't know, who knows, maybe like it could be like 15 years ago, something like that. It wasn't. They had a couple good shows. It wasn't all that bad. Now it's not even. It's insane. Chris, whatever way you go ahead,
it has become
nutcase.
just I said this going back what 13, 14 years ago when we were on terrestrial radio. It's not news anymore. It's an echo chamber. And the whole reason that management caved is because they only have viewers now that want to hear from that echo chamber.
That is
And
a great analysis, Dr. Lockman. I love that. That is awesome because it's almost like be careful what you wish for. They got hooked on the easy ratings with Trump. Am I not correct? And
yes,
now they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because their viewers, they're so nuts. They're like, they make CNN viewers look normal. They're so out of control nuts, batshit nuts, that if they had any dissenting opinion, they'd pull the plug on their own network.
and
Not a good
that
position to be in.
no, and that's the problem. And quite frankly, management needs to stand up to the on-air personalities. They need to say, we are a news network. We're not a
No, no.
propaganda I mean, and actually give both sides of the story. Because you know what? The whole point of listening to an echo chamber is so you don't hear dissenting opinions. But dissenting opinions and give you the whole story. When you have, like CNN used to have point counterpoint.
Yeah, used to.
Used to,
Now it's
yes.
a parallel universe. There you
When
go.
you had both sides of a story presented and both anchors, because they were news anchors, had to rely on facts, you actually got a better picture of what was going on
Used to watch CNN all the time.
instead of the echo chamber that MSNBC is stuck in now.
Well, what do you think of O'Reilly? I want your comment on what O'Reilly says. He thinks because of all this that NBC, the news brand, is in big trouble. Goldberg, they had a discussion on it from CBS, ex-CBS guy. I think he got out to pasture. He's older, but he's a conservative. He didn't feel as much, but credibility, they've kind of lost it. Um, O'Reilly's stance or viewpoint was that it permeates all the way down to Lester Holt, meaning the after effect. Do you agree with him or not?
Well, I don't think NBC has a news brand anymore. There is no news on, and I mean certainly not MSNBC. I mean
No,
we
absolutely.
literally had a judge say Rachel Maddow is not a reporter. There's this has nothing to do with news, and MSNBC as a whole. I mean, certainly Jen Psaki has nothing to do with news.
No,
And Lester Holt, I honestly believe, lost all of his credibility in 2016 when you literally heard him choke up when he
yep,
announced that Trump won the election.
yes,
In
yes,
in the
very
good
yes.
in the good old days of news, it didn't matter who won the election. You never would have known who Walter Cronkite supported, who he
No
voted
question about
for.
it.
And and to be fair,
Oh, wait a
Walter.
second. On that note, if for our listeners, you'd find it fascinating to YouTube like election results 1976, 1980. I'm sure some of these reporters had a liberal bent, but you would never, to your point, Dr. Lieberman, you would never know it.
All right,
I mean, you don't have people crying.
I mean, we do know that, in
It's
retrospect, we
radish.
know that Walter Cronkite was a
Yes.
liberal. We know that Dan Rather was a liberal, but you could never tell that on the air. When they reported news, they reported the facts. Their opinion didn't matter. The only time Walter Cronkite ever stated an opinion was when he came out against the Vietnam War. That was one time in over 2 decades of reporting.
No question about it. Yes, I would agree. I think the whole news business, I think it started with Watergate because it attracted, after that, it attracted activists. You had that movie, All the President's Men, all that kind of nonsense. And I think that's what, 50 years ago almost. I think from then on, you just had socialist activists going into the media business, the reporting business, and any kind of impartiality is out the window. And I think America suffers for it, especially when you have people that knowingly lie, knowingly um, pervert things, like Trump saying it's going to be he was talking about the auto industry. Anyone would know it, but it's very troubling to have news
Well,
organizations intentionally report the opposite.
and it is actually funny the real world consequences that happen when they shift their news, when they twist things around. Because if you've paid attention to Trump's recent speeches, he has used the word bloodbath over and over. It's
It's
like
excellent. Yes.
when they came after him for saying it was going to be a bloodbath, he went, "Oh, they don't like that word. I'm going to use it constantly."
Yes, he just know he's in all of their heads, isn't he? without a doubt. They Donald Trump lives in their what's left of their cranium. But it was really interesting. Erin Burnett, okay, I'm just probably butchering her name. I really have disliked her many years ago. She's again another quintessential example of a spoiled brat, elitist Democrat liberal who happens to be on the news or a quasi news organization. And RFK Jr. was on her show, and she asked him the question about threats to democracy, thinking that it was going to go her way. He basically came back and said, "No, Biden's a bigger threat than Trump." And amazingly, you think a journalist, that's what you're paid to do, go back and forth. She had him, he left the interview, left the studio. Then she had a fact checker. I mean, that's like Stalinistic. It's like, what? Like, you let a guy leave. Anyone who knows that any kind of give and take, you have a dialogue. Well, I don't know if that's true, and then he has an opportunity. Basically, it's like the Soviet Union. He leaves, and they have the propaganda minister from the Kremlin tell you what actually should be said or heard.
Well, I don't know that there's any broadcast reporters left that really know how to do a challenging interview. I mean, we saw this going back years already on CBS with Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff would come on, lie through his teeth about the evidence that he had that
Amazing.
Trump colluded with Russia. And not one reporter on CBS ever questioned his facts. They never made him substantiate the facts. They
No,
just let
because
him
it
lie.
served their needs. Yeah, served their needs. Anyone with a brain, which is probably few and far between in the corporate media, would know his story is like, yeah, okay. It's like the conspiracy theory that 1,000 people have to keep quiet in order for people to, not know it. The thing was a joke. They knew it was, but they knew it was a joke. But it served their needs, and that's a very sad commentary
Well,
on our
I'm
current.
not sure that that's the whole story, though. I mean, yes, the narrative served their needs, it boosted their ratings, and that was a big motivator. But I honestly do not believe that journalists are being trained anymore to do their jobs. I don't think they're capable, especially in the broadcast media. Now, there are still a couple of print journalists,
Couple.
and honestly, if you go to substack.com, there's some very good journalism on both sides of the aisle being done there. But most journalists are not being trained to ask questions. They're not being trained in what a primary source is. I mean, when I was an active reporter, if I was writing a story, I needed three independently verified sources with at least one of them willing to go on the record. Now, everything is, oh, they're anonymous sources. We're not going to tell you who they are. And, oh, it's a tweet. Well, a tweet is not a primary source, it's a quote. But it's not a primary source because somebody says something on social media doesn't make it true.
Okay, but let's explore that a little deeper. Yes, I think you're 100% correct. Yes, there's motivations there, but isn't it also possibly not the maybe 50% of it, but a percentage of the malfeasance in the current media landscape? Could it be that, like we were talking about, higher education is just kaput? You go to journalism school, Columbia Journalism School, you just get indoctrination. There's no real instruction. I mean, I think that might be part of it.
I think that's a big part of it. Colleges and universities are pushing their narrative. And we've seen this blow up in the last, 6 months or so, when, of course, it came out that part of that narrative was anti-Semitism, part of it was DEI. You know, it is absolutely amazing that they're not learning facts anymore in college. And I had this conversation just earlier today. This actually happened a few years ago, but we were talking about this. And I believe we talked about this at the time on the podcast. UC Berkeley as part of the California educational system, it is very easy for anyone from the California public schools to go to UC Berkeley because it's all part of the same education system. So they welcome you. However, UC Berkeley got tired of having to put students from the California public education system into remedial math and English classes in order to meet their standards. So instead of helping to fix the public education system, they got rid of their requirements.
Yeah,
And
why not? Well, law schools are doing that too. Part of it's DEI, part
what
of it's just dumbing down. But yeah, even SATs, that's optional. Yes,
SATs?
it's
I'll
true.
go I'll go you one better. The state of Washington has just removed the bar exam as a requirement to practice law in the state of Washington because they
Excellent.
thought the bar exam was discriminatory.
Yeah,
It's
discriminates
like,
against people that don't know anything
it's
about
like
law.
really, right.
There you
Either
go.
you know the law or you don't know the law. And if you don't know the law, you should not be practicing law.
There you go. But it's also liberalism is actually the ultimate racism because deep down they feel that blacks and other minorities are incapable. Biden said that. He goes, yeah, it's something like black kids can, he was talking about rich kids and black kids putting them, jumbling them together. Yeah, that's how they really think if you really want to peel back the onion.
It
Correct?
is, and it goes even deeper than that. I saw a fantastic interview that was talking about the drug companies and how important it is for people to be getting proper nutrition and exercise and less reliance on drugs. And they were talking specifically about Ozempic. But what came out of this conversation was they were talking about how the government could make some very minor changes to really help the situation. And one of those changes that they said was don't allow food stamps to be used for soda and candy. You know,
There you go.
require healthy foods to be purchased with food stamps. Well, as it turned out, what was revealed in this interview is that the drug companies have actually been lobbying against the food stamps being limited to that because they want to maximize these weight loss drugs. But who is lobbying for the drug companies? And you can actually go online and look this up because they are required to disclose this. The NAACP is lobbying in favor of the drug companies. And their lobbying method is claiming that not allowing black families to buy soda and candy is racist.
Well, the NAACP has long outlived any useful life for the black community. They're enablers of their demise, just like Reverend Al and all the others. They're just basically
Well,
making money off the racial gain.
clearly they're not in this to help African
No,
Americans if they
no,
are literally lobbying for
to
African
kill them.
Americans to have poor health.
There you go. It's very troubling to say the least. We do end a era of again with Joe Lieberman, and kind of interesting, correct? That
Yeah, this
he was the last of the moderates, as name escapes me. It doesn't make a difference who said it, but I'll think of it in a second. Last of the moderates who just opposed him to Chuck Schumer. You could kind of throw up. Mark Levin said that
yeah,
he's the last of the.
Joe Lieberman was a true gentleman, or as we say in Yiddish, a mensch.
Yes, he was.
He did not care, and I was lucky enough to meet him on a few occasions when I was a reporter.
Proud supporter of Israel too.
He was a
Proud
proud
Jew.
supporter of Israel. He believed in his religion to the
He did.
point that when there was an important vote in the Senate on a Saturday, he would walk to the Senate rather than drive or ride because, as an Orthodox Jew, you're not supposed to be in a car on the Sabbath. Um, but he didn't care what party you were. He didn't care what side of the aisle. He was willing to work with everybody. And what was truly interesting when you met with him, when you spoke with him, and you didn't have to be a reporter, you didn't have to be one of his political peers, you could just be a man off the street. If you walked up to him and you asked him what he thought of something, he would not just tell you his opinion and he would back it up with facts, but he would ask what your opinion was. And he wanted to know why you had that opinion because he was always looking for more information. He never assumed he was 100% right. He wanted to know more. And Joe Lieberman, unfortunately, was a canary in the coal mine.
Yes,
Because if you track politics back, the demise of what was then the Democratic Party and is now a socialist liberal
socialist party.
party can be tracked down. The tipping point was when the Democrats pushed him out of the party
Yes,
and
he
he
won as an
won
independent.
his Senate seat as an independent because the voters in Connecticut knew it didn't matter what you called him. He was going to be fighting for them.
100%. And that is a great, amazing, amazing analysis. That is worthy of national TV, meaning that was the tipping point. That is 100,000% correct. That event was when the Democratic Party went from a party left of center to a socialist, authoritarian, anti Semitic, anti Israeli party. End of story. That was the event.
And
Yes, sir.
and more
Nope.
than that, after he ran as an independent, he continued to caucus with the Democrats. And in 2008, the Democrats actually toyed with the idea of throwing him out of the caucus because he did not follow their orthodoxy. And the only reason they didn't is because he was so well liked that the backlash against the party would have been palpable.
Yes, yes, but he would be no longer welcome in that party. That's why it was basically one of the key drivers of no labels. It's just really sad how this has ended up for the Democratic Party. I don't know if it's actually, I've heard many commentaries that basically, except for the elitists and the down and outers, people are leaving the Democratic Party in droves.
Yeah,
It's
I
kind
mean,
of amazing. But my
no
question to you also would be, go ahead.
no labels issued a statement after his passing that said not only was it a loss to them and the country, but he was not simply one of the founding members of No Labels. He was their moral center. And I think
Yeah, well, those
that says more about him than anything.
100%. In those days, you had those days on both party are basically have drawn to a close.
Yeah,
But my only question
neither
to you is,
party has a moral center anymore.
zero. Um, my question to you is, do you think that Joe Lieberman and Biden commuted on the same bridge across Baltimore?
Nice,
Uncle Joe. Wow.
nice segue. Yes, when Joe Biden was making a speech about the Francis Scott Key Bridge that collapsed in Baltimore, he mentioned that he commuted across that bridge to
Hmm.
Washington via car and train frequently, except the bridge was built in 1977, and in all of that time there has never been a train track going across that bridge. Once
Well,
again, Biden just spins his stories with no regard to actual facts.
Yeah, he's also a sociopath. Even before he was senile, he was a sociopath. Everything revolves around him. He's really a mean son of a bitch that has no regard for anything else but himself. And as I quote, Kelly is his last name from Newsmax, Mark Kelly, that low on talent, high on ambition. That's Uncle Joe. Uh, and Uncle Joe is also increasingly distancing himself now from Israel as Israel braces for a possible attack from Iran because they struck one of their leaders. Uncle Joe is pulling back and is starting to heavily criticize the Israeli military for killing a aid worker. Like we never did that in Vietnam. Like there's never been collateral damage except for with Israel. Clearly,
Yeah,
because Uncle Joe has no more. Uncle Joe has no
ironically though.
moral compass. But Uncle Joe never had a moral compass. You're talking about Lieberman, and everything for him is expediency.
Yeah, ironically, nobody ever pays attention when Russia killed aid workers in
There you
Ukraine.
go.
They didn't care that Hamas killed civilians in
No,
Israel. When Israel bombed the aid area, I'm forgetting the name of the aid station, but
so do I.
they generally do not comment on military actions. In this case, however, they came out immediately, accepted responsibility, apologized for the situation, immediately said they were taking steps to ensure this never happens again. And yet they're the ones who are taking all of the heat. Now, I don't think Biden cares about Israel one way or the other. I think he initially supported Israel because the Jews are an important constituency within the Democratic
100%. No, he
Party.
did it as a knee jerk reaction because he's still living 20 years in the past. That's the last time he was coherent when the Democrats in Israel were lockstep those days. That train left the station, to quote
Right.
Uncle Joe.
So
There you go.
because he did not want to lose the Jewish constituency in the upcoming election, he immediately supported Israel. And then the pro-Palestinians and the left-wing wackos of his party started protesting and trying to pull him, and now he's afraid to lose them. So he's
Yes, he
walking
is.
this political tightrope, which quite frankly has
It's
angered
lose
both
lose.
sides. He may very well lose both the left wing and the Jewish population.
Well, speaking as a Jew, Jews, any Jews listening out there, please, it's time to leave.
And
Please.
going back to Joe Lieberman for a moment, Joe Lieberman took Chuck Schumer to task
Whoa.
over Schumer's comments about Israel needs to elect a new prime minister. Lieberman came out and literally said, how dare you tell another country what they need to do in times of war with their own politically elected leadership?
Like you said, he was a mensch, not a limp kneed, opportunistic piece of shit, and that's what Chuck Schumer is. He's despicable. To do that in the middle of the heat of combat, that's treasonous. As a Jew, it's treasonous. But that's who he is, Chucky Schumer. Well, and again, an entitled, elitist, liberal pig.
Well, again, you have an entire generation of older Democratic politicians who were moderate at one time, but now care so little about their constituents and so much about keeping their jobs. And they have such fear of the left wing of their party that they are simply kowtowing to them no matter what's actually good for the American people.
Well, they need to grow a pair, and what he did is despicable. But it doesn't surprise me because that's who Chuck Schumer is and probably was. But Dr. Lopkin, that concludes another very exciting episode of Carnivore Bites. And our listeners can access us on many platforms and also give their input, can't they?
Yes, let us know your thoughts. Where do you stand on all of these issues? You can let us know at xvadio.com/connect. You can also contact us, message us through the Carnivore Radio Facebook page. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com, the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin, and your analysis about the Lieberman incident being the tipping point was awesome.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you next week.
We'll see you then.